And if you do want to play along with the home version of our game, it is bit.ly/inedco14cops. That's communities of practice. And if you want to do the whole note thing for the entire conference, you can go to the second one there. But we'll get started in maybe, let's go 2 minutes.
Selected ones.
Hey. Hi. Steel case? What could that possibly mean? Verb steel case. I wanted to go to that conference. Are you guys ready back there? 3. Dear Lord. Did you just make my name a verb?
Isn't that what everything?
That's fair. It means something different in DPS.
Yeah, I was going to say, how would you?
What does it mean in DPS?
It's, well, I'll let you explain it.
It means to solve a problem while other people are talking about the problem.
So like in the meeting, you just do the thing rather than talking about the thing that you want to do?
It's really going to will off this right now.
Right.
It's like a will off break.
Right.
You can do that.
All right. So thank you so much for coming. We are going to get started. I do use my teacher voice more than I use the red cat, so if you're fine with that, stick around. We are going to be in this collaborative document. There's a lot of stuff on the first page for you to explore, and we'll talk through a couple of different things. But I wanted to make sure that I know who's in the room, that you know me, and then we'll kind of get started a little bit. So my name is Ben Wilkoff. I'm the Director of Personalized Professional Learning, and I'm just going to do this the whole time, in Denver Public Schools. And before that, I worked in a leadership development firm for about a year. Before that, I was at Edmodo in the time period where they went from 500,000 users to 5 million users, which was really cool to see how many teachers were starting to use that particular tool and starting to think about their classrooms differently and sort of the connected nature of the classrooms. And before that, I was in Douglas County, both as a teacher and as an online learning specialist. I want to know who is in the room. So how many of you are teachers and will be teachers in this coming school year? All right. How many of you are in a awesome blended role that is somewhat ill-defined and you feel really good about? Okay. Some sort of leadership and teacherish role. I like it. Good. How many of you are sort of in a fully defined district role that may have existed for a couple of years? Okay, great. And how many are there secondary versus elementary? How many secondary folks specifically? How many? And all is fine. And elementary, okay. I just want to make sure if there are specifically elementary things that we want to address or specifically secondary things that we know who we are and what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing a lot of discussion up front, so you will be able to hopefully think about some things before we dive deeply into some of the tools. But before we get going, I want to make sure that you're in the right place. So this session, our purpose is to outline online communities of practice and how they can be a key driver for change within a school or a district. And thinking about how they will engage teachers and leaders in personalizing their own professional learning. And you may note that I worked my own title into the purpose here. that's kind of my goal everywhere I am, is thinking about where teachers and leaders have choice and how they can actually choose some of the paths that they go down for their own learning. So you guys have a lot of choice in here, and the first choice is whether or not you want to stay. The non-purpose is the session will not dig deeply into all of the benefits. Okay? It's rather going to focus on the ones that are most beneficial to you personally and thinking about how you would use them. Our specific goals are thinking about sort of the understanding of the three elements, and we'll talk about that, of an online community, good practice, and then you are all going to become members of the Blendtastic, bombastic, personalized PD community, and we're going to start posting some things and asking questions in there. I just ask that you guys are active teachers and learners of one another. I'm not the only expert in the room. You guys have a lot of expertise here. I am going to facilitate by asking lots and lots of questions and proposing ideas. Some of them you will like, some of them you will not. I'm okay with this. I want you to use all of the tools at your disposal, so your phones, your laptops, pads of paper if you would prefer. All of your tools are okay in here. I'm not going to get mad at you if you are suddenly consumed with something else that's going on in another session, but you still want to stick around and kind of eavesdrop on what we're doing here. Before we get started on our work, there is some background. So in Denver Public Schools, I'm pretty loud, so you probably should close it. Kevin. No. Well, I'll let you be the judge. So in Denver Public Schools this year, we've been doing work around online communities of practice, and sort of at the beginning of the school year, I said, you know what, we not only need to have these things, but we need to have people that can manage the online communities and think about maybe a community of community managers. And so we've been getting together throughout the year. We've gotten together 8 different times, and you can look at all 8 sessions that we have held and the topics we've discussed and things like that. So if you are looking to do something similar, feel free to copy or take any of the things from there. They are all there. You can also find our online community of practice manager community, which you can join. And then if you want to look for the research, and we'll talk about some of the research on online communities of practice, you can find it in that meta-analysis, which is a lot of fun to read through. I don't recommend trying to do that while we're in the session, but definitely something to look at. All right. So I asked you, or I was talking about there are 3 different elements to an online community. There is the online part, there is the community part, and then there's the practice part. And I want to figure out, why is it that we need all 3 of those parts? Why are those parts important? And so the essential questions for me, and I want you to talk to someone else for about 5 minutes, about what makes a group into a community, and what makes it a community of practice. And the organizing question that I always kind of ask is, are we a community just by convening here today? Okay? We are a group, an assembled group here. Did we come into community just by entering into the room? That's sort of guiding you in this conquest of questioning here. What makes a group a community? What makes a community of practice? 5 minutes. You can allow a 3rd person, but you know, it's going to take you a little longer. So at least 2 people. Go. Hi. Yeah, no, I just like listening. So what do you think? What makes a group into a community?
A common goal or common interest and relationships with the other members.
You have to have them going in order to be in community, or is it like going into the community, like do you have to have those relationships from the outset, or do you? I gotcha. So you're forming them. So the goal then is a problem? Okay.
or it could be a common interest that wants to get or wants to learn more about.
So it could be like just a common question that you all are trying to answer or something like that.
Or it could just be an interest that everyone has and they're getting together to talk about those.
Nice. Like that. It works for me.
Yeah. All right. Good.
Keep on going.
Then have a common interest in some way.
Actually take that and even that little connection, I have no idea who Ben is, and I'm going to say hello to him.
Hey.
But he already passed along my tweets from half an hour ago.
Great.
So,
Hey, I'm Ben.
nice to meet you. And if
I know.
Can I practice this thing on you?
Sure.
Hang on.
Does it work?
Yep. So.
Did you meet me?
So now I've got.
Did it feel good?
As a contact.
Look at that. That is pretty fun.
I'm practicing.
All right, finish up that last thought. Where's Linda? Linda Combe? No, that's not how you say that. Linda's not in the room. She's responding to somebody in the room. I get it now. All right. So, what did you guys come up with? I heard a couple of different things. There's something common. There's something common going on within a group that makes a group a community. What did you guys say? What was that common thing for you?
We talked about there's some level of reliance or interdependence.
Reliance or interdependence. So you need one another for something?
Yeah. There's some level of expectation of support, right? So if you get a class on the first day and you're talking about how you want the students to become a learning community, that probably doesn't mean that it's going to be all teacher all the time, quizzes and tests being graded. There's going to be some community or participant interaction and participant feedback and participant to participant support.
I like that idea that there could be something that we need from one another and that there is a dependence upon one another. Are there other ways a group could become a community? A common goal. And I heard a couple of people talk about goals, and what kind of goals specifically make that group into the community? Like we could all have a goal that we're going to lunch later, right? Which I'm sure that you all are, and I'm glad for it. But I don't know that that makes us a community. What kind of goals would make us into a community?
A goal, change or improvement or something like that, where we're looking to make a difference in something.
So the goal becomes about change or improvement. I like that a lot. Somebody was talking about a shared experience that you actually, within a community, in order to become a community, like you have to have a shared experience that creates a relationship between, you were talking a little bit about that, right? The relationships that are required for a community. What are you thinking about that?
It wasn't necessarily with the goal, it was just having relationships makes you a community, whether it's relationships formed through the experience or through the goal setting, but you have to have relationships. Otherwise you lost a bunch of people.
Right. Which I think we do a lot, right? Like PD events where it's like, hey, there's a bunch of people here, right? And maybe perhaps not creating the same type of community that we might. And so there is something, I mean, you wonder about things that are like we're sort of forging the bonds of friendship through a shared experience. And what can those experiences be, and what can they not be? Anything else about making a group into a community? And thank you for whoever is making that happen. Yes?
So we had a
brief conversation about sort of what the duration of a community is, like whether you could be a community if you're only together for 45 minutes, or if a community has to have more duration than that. No answers, but the duration is an interesting concept.
Well, in duration, and I would also say, like any community that we might create, how permeable are the boundaries of this community? Can we let other people into the community if they weren't here? Is there something specific about the duration of this time period that would allow us to either invite others in or specifically exclude them? Right? So there's something there that I think we should start to tackle. But who got to that? Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm actually wondering, to Kurt's question, like, community actually, I mean, it is not dependent upon that single person actually to continue its purpose, right? So people should be able to have flexible entry and exit if they need it, right? Or if that's just their situation. So it's a great question, the idea of it. The community is really around that culture, and then whatever the culture is that's going on in that, somehow this thing, the community, actually is what's keeping it going.
And the community itself is then sort of bigger than the sum of its parts at that point, right? And I think the deciding how long it goes or what its purpose is, I think is sort of one of the core pieces of the community itself. But what makes a community of practice? How does it function then to make it of practice? I haven't heard anything from this sort of foursome pocket back here.
I think that common vision can be practice. I know I'm a school librarian at this point, and the virtual community that we have as librarians is great because I don't have to reinvent the wheel so often. That's that practice. Somebody shares ideas, and oh, okay, let me try this with my kids. And so that's the practice piece, and it's we can bounce ideas off each other.
But let me ask you this question. So the community of practice that you have, would it be outside of the scope of that community for someone to say, I'm going to the mountains this weekend, who wants to come?
No. I mean, people have done that. I think from the professional standpoint, I mean, a lot of us are just kind of ignore this. I mean, but I think that's the part of community. You feel that you know people and you have a connection, and it's like, how cool that if there's a friendship that they would offer that. And
so at some point it becomes sort of okay to have that question, but I think that practice that you're talking about it's the practice of being a librarian, right? Of having that media center and really creating what that what that space looks like. How else does it become a community of practice?
I think it automatically, the idea of practice means it's being put into action. So we have this common philosophy, but now we're really doing something about it.
I think action is actually pretty important, right? Like if we're all just sort of spouting off ideas, but we don't ground it in what we're actually doing, then I think perhaps we don't have that practice element, right? Yeah.
It usually makes me think of things like one of Chris Anderson's earlier TED Talks about crowd-accelerated innovations and really how that really comes to light. You know, if you have a crowd, which is your community, and then you have this light, which is the people who are actually coming in and kind of the inspiration for that innovation, and then you kind of ratchet up the dials on all of those, and then you have this large desire at the end of it all. You start combining all of those. And people being positive contributors back into your community, that really starts to take a look at the community in practice, where you're able to contribute back rather than just consume, and then you remix so other people can stand on your shoulders and continue to make it better.
Well, and I think that idea of not being a one-way communication platform is really important, right? So the community of practice is that we are all practicing. It's not that the experts are practicing and we are learning from the experts. It is that we are all practicing and we have that. All right, so we've talked about a number of these different things, and feel free to add any thoughts that you might have that were not already spoken. But I want to know why we need to make it an online community of practice. Okay, other than this is a technology conference, guys. If we weren't putting it online, you know, what would we be doing? But really, like, why should we be venturing into making them online communities of practice?
We can make connections with so many more people, and they don't have to be right there. You don't have to be present to be a member and be a contributor, and I think that's really important.
So you've spoken about two different things that I think are really important. One is space, right? Like, we don't have to all be physically together. One is time, right? Like, I can post to a online community 10 days after you make your initial post and make that reply, and then we can dig deeper into something, right? So both of those are really important, yeah.
It's kind of like what you're saying, but accessibility. So outside people can come into it, but also you can access that stuff later. Putting it somewhere online, you have to think through it and you really have to develop it, or other people do, and then you can come back to that later, and that can be helpful later on.
That idea of archiving is really important to me, right? Like, I don't know if you've had the experience as a librarian where you get asked the same question over and over again, but I'm sure as most classroom teachers and things like that, you know, we have that same experience of the same question. But if that answer is already in the community, we can either point to it or we can dig deeper, right? We're not asking those initial questions anymore. We can go to those next layer of questions. Tyler, what are you thinking?
I think it widens who is able to participate in the community. If I relied on just the folks that I can see in person, that's a pretty small group of people versus
the world.
the world.
Right? Like, I think that that's huge, right? The idea that we can make our invite much, much, much larger, and that we can engage folks that are not just in our school or just in our district or just in our state, right? Yeah.
Gosh, to me, it's all about fresh ideas, you know, because you get your own little realm of who you're teaching with, even within your school, your district, or whatever. And then you expand that. I know just on a round table with you, and it's like, oh my God, those are great ideas, or talking with some other people nationally. And so I just really forced myself recently to do that, just for fresh ideas, new ideas.
Well, there's something about that that is somewhat rejuvenating. Like, I feel like we do get stuck in, whether it's our classrooms or in our districts, and we're like in it, right? Like, we have very little ability to see outside of what we're doing at this particular moment. I think we all have that moment, but the ability to say, you know what, I have a place. I have this space that I can go where I can explore further, right? Anything else before we move on? Yeah.
Well, just with that comment, just made me think that the ability to then really be ever evolving, I think is so much easier through an online community because things are always changing. And I think it just like reinforces that idea that like my philosophies are growing and evolving and changing, and that can all happen online. I think a lot easier than I don't know.
When you can actually see the change, right? Like, if I look back at the things that I was posting a year ago or 5 years ago, you know, I know that I'm not in that same place because I can see it, right? Whereas, and you might be able to do that if you're journaling or things like that on your own, but other people can't see that, right? It's visible signs of change, and then you start to think about, well, I probably have a change mindset about this, right? Like, I'm going through, and I can not only see my change, but everyone's change. Okay, so good. I'm happy that we have figured out why we should make online communities of practice. At this particular moment, I do want to do some online interaction. These are some of the assumptions for learning in communities of practice that are from that meta study, but that I've expanded a little bit for our purposes. So these are the assumptions that I have. If you have others, you can write the assumptions down that you have as well. But I want to start to think about this. Learning is fundamentally a social phenomenon. Knowledge is integrated in the life of communities that share values, beliefs, languages, and ways of doing things. The process of learning and the process of membership of a community of practice are inseparable. And that one takes a second to unpack. Okay? The process of learning and the process of being a member in the community, okay, are inseparable. Knowledge is inseparable from practice, so that idea that we are constantly talking about our practice. And then empowerment. The ability to contribute to a community creates the potential for learning. Equitable contribution depends on all voices being heard. Those are the assumptions that we have about online communities of practice. I would like you to comment on those assumptions. So many of you, most of you, all of you have made comments on a Google Doc. We're going to do this a couple of different times, but this is one of the times where I would like you to take a look, and I would like you to call out the things that are most resonant with you, the things that you disagree with, the things that you believe are really important for the work that you are doing. So in order to do that, take the stuff that you think is most important and try and make it as small as possible, just so that we can see what most people are commenting on. And you can either do a right click or control click if you're on a Mac, command I should say, and do a comment, or you can go up here and do your commenting using that icon. But there's a number of ways of doing it, and I just want you to think about what is most resonant to you, what do you disagree with most strongly, what are you thinking about in terms of your own work. Okay? Comment on these, and again, if you have other assumptions, please assume them and put them down below. We're going to spend about 6 minutes. Go. Yeah, if the interwebs are not being polite, it's okay. Just think it really hard, and it'll get there. I've got an extra Chromebook if you want it. No? Yes? No? Okay. I love all of the colors. It's like a rainbow. Oh, how do you get to this? Let me scroll up real quick. That one right there. Are we good? Who's going to be the first to press the submit button? Oh, they're there? Maybe I'm just not scrolled over. Yep. Okay. If you're done thinking about the things that you would like to take a look at, now I'd like you to try and reply. There are a couple of replies already there, but if you haven't replied already to a Google Doc comment, just click on the comment you want and then type in the bottom there. You got in there, Jess, too fast. That was my question, too. All right, whatever comment you're on, finish up that one.
I think I commented, we'll find out.
It's the possibility.
I'm pretty sure that happened.
All right, before we talk about these things, I would like to ask a question. What did you just do right now? Okay, you contributed. Okay, participated. What's that? Okay, something that was active and social. You had some discourse. So one of my biggest questions, yeah. You took a risk, right? You're putting your name against something that you are saying. All of those things that you just said did not require us to be online. Active participation, taking risks, having discourse. And I guess I would make the claim, we do not have a word for this yet. For this type of collaboration where no one was speaking, but we were all collaborating, discussing, engaging. And this is something that we do fairly frequently on sort of in our PD, in our classrooms. We are collaborating like this, but we just sort of use those words, right? Like, oh, I want you to collaborate now, and this is what collaboration is. But collaboration can look like a lot of things, but when we're talking about these types of collaborations where people are being challenged, people are asking bigger questions, right? There is something else going on here that I want to call attention to, whether we're in a Google Doc or we're in an online community. There is something that we're doing here that is somehow special about what this time period allows for. Yeah.
The one thing that this does, though, is it levels. There's no loudest voice in the room. There's no dominant personality. It allows for contribution by all at the same time. I mean, you're essentially sort of talking over each other, and that is one thing that this tool can provide.
Exactly, and so.
We were in a room.
Now, I do think that we will talk about some of the ways in which we can shut down conversations when we're in this kind of a space too, right? Like if you have somebody bullying somebody else, it will shut down and those kinds of things. But the structure itself allows for the equality of all voices, right? It allows for everyone to take part, okay? So if you come up with a better word for what this is, please let me know because I'm trying to find that word. What is this type of collaboration that we are all able to do now that we weren't able to do previously? All right. What are the most important things that you found in here? And I can look at the examples, but anything from someone else that you would like to notice. Okay, so someone else's comment that you thought was particularly good, not your own. It's okay to toot your own horn in this particular case. I'd like somebody else's comment. Yeah.
There's an entire conversation, I think 4 or 5 comments about how lurkers fit into a community practice that I think is really valuable on many levels.
Sorry, I was trying to find it very quickly, but apparently Control F does not allow me.
Comments from Jay.
Oh, on the social phenomenon, right? Lurkers.
Jay, are you a lurker? I think Kelly just called me a lurker.
So tell me more. There it is. Okay. So when you say the word lurker, what do you mean?
I mean a lot of stuff with it. I mean, I've seen value for a lot. I mean, some people just aren't willing or able or they don't want to do that. But they can still gain information and they can still feel empowered just by access to the information. Would we rather have their thoughts? Probably. But again, making them do it. Technology or no technology, I don't know how much good that will do.
Required participation, I think, is something that you're sort of dancing around there. Like, should we be requiring people to post in a community, like we have maybe in a 1998 Blackboard course, post twice and comment 3 times, right? Is that what we are talking about, or are we talking about something different here?
Does more equal better? Do more comments on the right side of this make it have more depth?
Yeah.
Maybe, maybe not. But for a lurker, I would hope they would come there to be able to use this as a resource, to be able to get what they need to, and not necessarily have to communicate with somebody if they're not comfortable doing that.
And I think you point out here something really interesting. Value for lurkers. True. What is that value for the lurker? Right? Yeah.
To me, it's the big time. You're no longer reinventing, creating everything yourself, because you can use that time instead to go out and find that resource from 6 people and pick your favorite parts. So in a classroom or for a teacher or even for a district, you can at least start a starting place. Rather than starting at 0, you can start wherever someone else made it to, for lack of a better way of saying it.
When we struggled with the word lurker a lot when we were having these conversations, is that the right word for this? Are they curators of resources? Are they folks who are simply just introverts? And can we just have an introverted participant within a community? Do we all have to be extroverts in order to find that value?
That's what I meant when I said I don't really mean. I think when a lot of people see that word, they think spooky. But I think there's some value to be able to curate, remix, and be able to share it again. Maybe with a community you're a little more comfortable sharing with or whatever. But also in a classroom when you're using, say, an LMS or something like this, and you have those requirements, lurking, I wouldn't even call it lurking, but when participation is no longer, it was mentioned earlier, when participation is no longer a choice, you're going to be called on every single one of these questions to reflect upon what, share your thinking or whatever. I think that's pretty powerful too.
Yeah.
We have a whole other dynamic on the other side, which used to be okay. If I don't make eye contact or raise my hand to you, you're not calling on me. You may not even know my name. But with some of the tools we have now, that's no longer an option. And I think that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, and I do think there's some aspect of accountability there. Like, I'm accountable for the things that I am saying, and we are accountable, and maybe I don't need to have an assessment to have that accountability and those kinds of things.
You don't have the one loud voice like mine right now that's taking over conversation. It's a level playing field, and I'll be quiet.
And well, that's fine, but no, that's fine. And one of the things that I think about too is, especially in online communities, is that it doesn't all happen right now. Right? Even though we have this spasm of collaboration that's happening here, it doesn't have to happen now. This will exist a year from now, 2 years from now. And I think the idea that some folks need more processing time, perhaps better processing time than what we are able to conjure up in this particular moment, thinking about, oh, and I learned something a year ago that now applies to this thing, and now I'm able to contribute. Right? Like, it's the sum of those things that allows me to contribute, but I can't yet.
I also think it's interesting, like the digital footprint left by a community of practice, because I think that the lurker piece is interesting, because I don't think a lurker is necessarily a member of a community if they're only reading. At the same time, I think that we sometimes make assumptions about lurkers, that they might be shy or that they might not know how, and those might not know how to contribute, and those might be true, but we also, what I've seen is somebody who's surveying 5 MOOCs at the beginning of a summer, trying to decide which one to join, and then they join late. And I think that person sort of looking critically at a lot of different digital spaces is something that's relatively a new affordance, and we could name that person as a lurker, but they're gaining a lot from looking at multiple communities of practice.
Right.
And the idea that the community of practice is giving to the lurker, but probably not gaining from it.
Well, and I think about what activities does it mean that I am a member? Like, what do I have to do in order to become a member of a community? Yeah.
I guess I just had a comment during everybody's talk. One of the things that I think online communities do is there's a risk of oversaturation of so much to look at, so many want to look at it. I think that's one of the things, the questions that I always deal with as a professional development person offering instructional then also, what I like about it though is that it gives a chance for you to listen to quiet voices that don't really speak too much. I think that's really important. There's just people that just tend to think it, and we're all different. We're not. So, it's kind of a good and a bad. So how do you make it?
And so there are a couple of things there that I think are really cool. And so honoring quiet voices is something that I think as a moderator or as a community manager that you get to do, because you can call attention to something that is great that someone who has only ever posted once has said, right? Rather than going back to those all-stars that are always posting great things. It's like, how do we talk about this where it's that one person who has a lot of value? All right, I want to wrap up the conversation and start to look at actual examples of what communities of practice are all about. Like, what are those actual activities that are going on within the community? Before we do that, I want to make sure that you this is my summary of sort of those key components, and most of them are the ones that we have already talked about. They're about shared practice, diverse and heterogeneous membership. It's not necessarily task-oriented, but can be, and that they're really about learning. So thinking about how do we make sure that those are a part of each and every online community that we have. But keep on scrolling on the doc, keep on going down, and then this is what I want you to think about. So I've pulled 5 different examples, 5 examples of online communities of practice interactions. They all happen to be within Google+, because that's one of my favorite spaces, but they don't have to be there. Like, these are things that could have happened anywhere. But these are all different examples of online communities of practice. And there have been other groups that have gone through these images, so you'll see some other comments. So you feel free to reply to those people. They'll still be engaged in this conversation. But what I want you guys to do is comment on these images and think about how they represent those core aspects of an online community of practice that we've already talked about. Now, when you open them up, it's going to look like this, which is crazy looking. Okay? So you have like a whole bunch of comments on the side. What I want to do is go to the 100% button right here. So it's going to show it at full resolution. And you'll notice that all of these little areas here that I can hover over are a comment. Okay? So I can comment on this little square here, this little square, this one right here. And in order to do that, what you do is not go up to comments up at the top. A lot of people do that, but that's just like general comments on the whole image. What you want is this button right there, where it's going to let me select the part that I want to comment on. And if you've never commented on an image, this is one of my absolute favorite things to do, because I can comment on the very smallest thing in the world that I want to, and I can have a conversation about it. Okay, and I can reply to it and have that ongoing conversation. The only other sort of tricky thing is you'll notice that your scroll bar will zoom you in and out. Okay. Rather than that, or if you use your 2-finger zoom in and out kind of thing, if you use this, you're just going to get comments scrolling up and down. So what you want is the arrow keys to go up and down the image. Okay? I'll give you guys about 10 minutes to go into the different examples. I want you to notice some things. Okay? I want you to notice some things. What is valuable about these interactions? What makes them great examples of online communities of practice? Conversations, interactions, those kinds of things. Before you guys do that, any questions about it? You guys are super easy, but if you do have questions, raise your hand and I'll come around. 10 minutes, go. What you got?
Some of that.
Oh, well, that's fun.
Yeah, we're close.
That's a good time.
We're getting there. It's trying. It's thinking.
It's a good time. Yeah. I keep getting these wonderful messages about people trying to troubleshoot the Wi-Fi, so bear with it, but it will happen for you at some point. Not so much either of you.
No, I'm making that.
I'm just going to do something real quick. I'm just going to try something. And you are allowed to talk, so don't feel bad about talking. All right.
I clicked social studies, but then Google just said I was trying to connect them.
Okay, let me see if we can connect to another network here.
You're the best.
Hey, thanks. Hey, what are you doing? Stop.
I'm so glad you took computers like that.
Knock it off.
Can I ask you to,
All right, try now.
Do you want to play on mine?
Yes. All right, try now.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else having like super duper big troubles?
That's a big question.
All right. I was talking specifically about this.
It's just not loading. It's just taking a while, I think.
All right, try it now.
Silly God.
What are you thinking? Not so much.
Can't even get into the We're just waiting.
Well, that's less fun, I feel like.
Oh, I can't even get in. Comment.
We're just gonna try this one,
I'm not
okay?
even lurking. I appreciate it.
You're lurking. Good.
Not even. I'm looking over her shoulder.
You've got a partner.
That's right.
Let's see.
I think it's
What do we
going to be
think?
much happier.
Are we? Maybe.
I'm feeling really confident.
Well, I just got everybody on this one, so maybe now we're just. Whoa! Wait.
Look.
It's feeling better.
It is. Is it?
It's
Yes.
like this much
It's
better.
that close. Thank you, sir. Oh, yeah.
Ooh, what are you on? Is this 8?
Yeah.
I don't know that I've even played on an 8.
Well, there you go. Oh, and I'm here. Oh, it worked. Thank you. Okay.
All right, are we feeling it?
Yeah, and I think that's why.
What are we doing? bit.ly/inedco14 COPS. All right, see what you can do.
I'm so happy.
Are you?
I'm super ticket. I don't like not physics.
I don't know that we've actually ever really
I know, but
met.
I kind of know you from
Right, yeah.
circles. So.
Right.
Leslie Robinson.
I'm Ben.
Yeah, I know.
How's it going?
Good.
Yeah, let's do it. Right. Right. So we're all you might have to refresh. Yeah, now you got it.
Going through my phone. Wait for it. Sorry, Ben.
You're fine?
Oops.
You're fine.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I'm supposed to be able to like click on this, right? And then
So do that first,
I see.
and then highlight the spot that you want. Okay, hold up how many more minutes you would like to do this for. I see 2s. 2 minutes it is. I done got kicked off.
So all over the place issues. So it's not our Wi-Fi. We're only at 25% capacity. Copper put in new stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's where we're having issues. And I don't know when we're going to get it fixed.
No worries.
So, I know you're not, but not everyone else is going to be like.
I once did a keynote without Wi-Fi.
Where did these examples come from?
Just different online communities. So if you look at the top of them, it'll say like what the community was. No, I don't think any of them are.
None of those are from GPS. What did you get?
Just public communities. All right, how are these good examples of interactions within an online community of practice? How do these sort of exemplify what we've talked about thus far? That they are really around solving problems, that they're about learning, that they are really, focused on the practice. Yeah, Kevin.
So the third point of key components is trust is the glue. And I think in the science one, around the physics resources, when there's banter about Khan Academy as a resource, and whether it's rigorous enough or if it's a valuable resource or not, that you have people who are disagreeing with each other, and then it even gets to the point where someone kind of provides an apology. It seems like inside of this example, there's a culture of trust, because it's not just putting out the idea that this is a great resource, but somebody's critically thinking and providing an example of why it may not be. So.
Well, I think that's huge, right? Like, that we don't always have to agree on things to be in community with one another. Like, it's important that we can disagree, and I think if we probably went around, we would all have different opinions on Khan Academy and why it might or might not be valuable. And I think that actually having that diversity of opinion is pretty important, right? Like, if we only agreed with each other in community, then I don't know that we would get anywhere, right? We don't get further just by agreeing with one another. What did you guys see in your stuff? Oh, I'm sorry. So what did you see when you saw?
One thing is just that I noticed that our resources were provided. There were some links, so sometimes just expanding beyond my opinion is a kind of opinion where I found that.
And we don't ask students to do that, right? Like, support their opinions with facts or resources, right? Like, we would ask each other to do that, to provide those resources and to link to them. I think that's pretty valuable. I think almost to a one, they were really thinking about, well, this is valuable, so I want to share it, or I want to ask a question about it, I want to dig deeper into it. Okay? Why else are these good examples of communities?
For the social studies one, so that's, I think, kind of controversial, and so hearing different philosophies and ideas and put into practice, I think, can really help shape your practice.
And so
have that community to help shape that.
And I think you've talked about this a couple of times, but that idea that we're actually forming it throughout the conversation. We're forming our ideas by having it, right? Like, nobody goes in with, like, this is the thing, right? You're going in, I think, with this idea that I'm going to be forming it as we go. Did you have something? No? Okay. Yeah?
Just back to that physics one. The person who was starting out to pose the question was, he's a short timer in the subject matter, apparently. So he's only a long-term sub for the school year, yet creating this community around a question from somebody who potentially may not be in this long-term to get a lot of information back. I mean, the cost benefit for everybody involved, that's pretty amazing.
Right?
Yeah, it is. Because that guy may not be there next year in this same community, or at least part of it. But it will get into the point where he's a contributor and maybe we'll get back in another.
So now, at this point, I want to ask you a question that stopped me in my tracks a couple weeks ago. It was somebody that I was talking with, and she was looking at a couple of these examples, and she asked the question, why do we need PD? And like, on the one hand, I'm like, oh, because we need to develop ourselves, and we need to learn, and we need to, and then she was like, but why do we need PD? And like, she kept pushing on this. And so when I look at things like this, that I'm saying, oh, but this is, obviously this is like one form of PD, and we would talk about, you know, how this would be an acceptable substitute perhaps for like a session that you are going to because you're asking these questions. But that question keeps on bugging me, like, why do we need PD when we can have those rich conversations and it can be about the problem that I'm trying to solve right now, and I don't have to sit through the 3-hour thing to get the thing that I need. Like, so my question is around, like, if these are good examples of online communities of practice, then does it challenge the way in which we either deliver or host or you know, communicate our professional learning? And so to me, and if you keep on scrolling down back at our doc, to me it challenges us. Okay? It requires a shift in emphasis from formal training to learning in practice and through practice. Communities of practice go beyond traditional forms of professional development. The one shot and perhaps even face-to-face model that are about events. Now, I understand the irony of me standing in front of you and talking about this. I get that. But it may challenge those pieces. Communities of practice allow teachers and leaders to act as co-producers of that knowledge, okay, which requires a greater personal responsibility for professional growth. And I would say that even as lurkers, the responsibility should still be there, that they have a responsibility for their own growth. And then I think this last piece is pretty important. In our current state, communities of practice are only infrequently used for professional development. Okay, I want everybody to go half-mast with their laptops. And I would like you to talk about what communities of practice challenge you, either in giving professional development or in receiving, taking part in. How does it challenge you to think about the way in which you are engaged in that work? Okay, does that make sense as a question? Okay. Okay. How does it challenge you? When you look at these examples and I ask that question of why do we need PD, how does this challenge you in your work to think about it differently? What would you do differently? How does it challenge you to think about professional development in a new way? Okay? Go. Yeah, feel free to swivel.
All it's missing is a little motor. So here's the question, and this, I don't want to start, but I'll just, so it seems like at first there's a difference between that person that truly seeks to develop their craft, right? And they're going to seek it, they're going to, you know, develop the PLS, you know what, but is there a group, is there a group that just says, you know what, I'm good. I'm good. I know my craft, I know my content, I'm a pretty good teacher. I'm good. Without the block of time that you set aside 6 times a year, and you require staff to show, and that person is there getting their professional development, getting their hours. You know what I mean?
I want to know why. Like, I think there are those people, and I want to ask them why you feel
That's
why,
my question.
what brought you, but still chances are
Okay. See, that's important.
being berated for trying those new things and then not being able to just break into it.
Or they figured out, like, just as the community, like, as this is going through, like, maybe they figured out their own thing, right? Like before the interwebs, people were still able to share.
Right, learning didn't happen only after the internet.
Yeah, and so my thinking is there are some people who learn even just through reflection and asking themselves questions, right? And so did that mean that they necessarily have to go to 1 hour? I'd be wondering about the intention. We know that there's going to be, you're going to be compelled sometimes either by I'm passionate by this, from that range to I'm being compelled by compliance. And so I'd make that distinction too. I'm used to PDs that are compliance based because I have to learn this thing as a whatever. But then also, like, all of the other choices. I mean, why don't we say this is your hour to do the thing you're going to do with it? You're a professional. It's implied by the development I'm sending you to. Yeah.
What are you thinking about?
Well, I was thinking, I'm actually in the process of developing a personalized media plan for 40 employees.
Nice.
And, just like in a classroom with students, you can't always teach to their specific learning style. You have to you might teach in a collaborative environment, and there might be for students that get more out of it than, these students. But you just have to change it up, and you have to offer different things. But everybody has to suffer through some stuff because they don't.
Suffer? Suffer?
I would say because, you have that. I work for an after school program, and you have that quality component where you want students to get. You have a really great site here, and then you expect them to really do that well. The students aren't getting as much out of it. The students here are like, why is that? So you have to require employees to sort of come in and learn, and sometimes they don't seem to like it. they kind of just, I don't know.
Do they own 100% of it? You know what I mean? They don't like it.
Well, I mean,
do we have to own part of that?
That's what I'm struggling with. So how do we develop professional development? Because right now our staff members come in and we teach them, and staff really like it. Some staff, I think they don't get as much. So are those, if they're not getting it, that learning?
Hopefully we're exposed. Right. So how do we marry that with community where and so then as a building you're trying to make progress. I don't know, because all of those things are really challenging. Yeah. Really challenging. Yeah, yeah. Really strong nutrition. Yeah, and that's true.
You don't have anybody
How many more minutes do you want to have a conversation for? Okay, I'm seeing 3 to 5. Let's go with that. So are you feeling challenged? Good. I'm glad.
I don't miss any knowledge you're just relaxing.
No. I want to have a conversation, but please feel free to. It's your potty, and you can go if you want to. No, that's not okay.
We don't put baby in the corner like that.
So what are you guys thinking about?
A lot. We were just actually talking about the difference between elementary and secondary educators when it comes to their willingness to be open to trying new things and learning new things and having new conversations and not feeling like that. I don't know if learning process is so you ask a question, you will assign the answer, and you move on. It can come anywhere, anytime, and how that's okay. Because if there's a certain fear that goes along with having to make these changes.
Right.
And building that community of trust where it's okay to not have the answer, to not know the answer. I think know that nobody in this room.
So you're saying secondary typically need the answer?
Yeah. Or if they don't know something, I saw it all the time where one of my colleagues did not know how to use a certain technology with their
Right.
kids because they didn't feel comfortable, even though their kids are now missing out on this really important opportunity.
Right.
Because of their fear, or they're not willing to name it, or to not have control at all times. So,
Yep.
but we see in elementary, they're way more flexible.
The question I have is, will that potentially change? I mean, that our kids were born into a world clicking a mouse. They will never know what commercials are ever. They'll be bumping through with the DVR.
My kids love commercials.
Okay?
Anytime that they see them, they're like, it's such a novelty.
It's a novelty because we don't get it. And so, they won't know anything about flat screen TVs and stuff like that. So, but Google did something in essence of creating this culture of questioning that our kids are comfortable with, okay? We may have grown up a little bit with that as well, and so we're comfortable with that. But yes, some of our teachers, they just aren't comfortable asking the questions sometimes of, how do I do this?
But I would challenge you, how do you get them comfortable?
I totally agree with that. Okay, no matter how hard that answer hides, you have to find it.
Right.
Okay, there's an entry point for everybody. It really is. And so if you can find something that you know that there's a connection with them, I mean, that's what you have to do. You have to have a connection. And that's why building relationships with the people you work with is so important.
Right.
Your human resource is your best resource ever, and you might as well use it.
About people? Oh, entry points. And multiple entry points, right? Like not just the one? All right. Finish up that last thought. All right. So I heard some really amazing things happening. And there was a lot of challenging, not only of your own practice, but of one another that I was hearing. And that's really my favorite thing, is when you are looking to one another for some challenge. And you may notice I am sort of particularly not relying on the Wi-Fi at the moment, which is something that you have to do, is have the ability to be a little bit adaptive. But if you are in the doc, and you are able to get down to how does this challenge you in your own PD, either PD that you give or receive, please do jot something down as we're talking. But I want to hear a couple of things that I was noticing as I was going around. One was this idea of required versus optional. Like, what is required PD versus optional PD? Okay, and where does that fit into how this challenges us? There was also some conversation around the divide between teachers who would naturally get this, they would gravitate toward it, and perhaps some who might not. How do you deal with that? And there was also perhaps a little bit of challenge around, well, I think our concepts of what PD are. Right? Like, or is. When we look at development, is it a personal development, or is it a we need to develop together? And it doesn't have to be either or, but there was some challenge out there around who owns PD. Right? Do I own it as a teacher or as a leader? Or does the district own it? Does the school own it? And so I want to think through a couple of those things. So maybe give me a couple of highlights. And if you want to be the note taker for your group, please do put it in there, assuming you have Wi-Fi. But I would love to hear your thoughts around this. Okay? What were the challenges that, and this group back here was like going at it. So I really want to hear from you guys around, like, what are the challenges that you were feeling and thinking about? Yes, please. You can speak. You are allowed.
But it's on a couple different levels depending on what district you're in, you know, and it gets down to, you know, I'll be talking on a certain level, and then about teachers, you know, having teachers take ownership for their own PD, making sure they join at least one network, and personalizing PD. And then it kind of goes back to, like, some teachers are uncomfortable with technology, and other districts. You know, and I guess it just depends on what building you're in. So it's kind of, everybody really lives in a different place with that. But that would be my challenge, is to personalize PD and then the teachers start taking more ownership for their own. And how do you do that?
So one of the things that I struggle with most is with the idea that we are a function of our school or a function of our district, is that in a lot of ways, not in every way, but in a lot of ways, we don't really function that way anymore. Like, we are individuals that are part of other systems, but I can communicate with anyone at any time that I want to. Those hierarchies that sort of typically would exist, they don't really exist for us anymore. I can speak to the principal of the innovative school in Philadelphia if I would like to, and figure out what they are doing. I can, you know, talk with the 35 or so other people in the room here, and I don't have to be in the same room. So thinking about, like, okay, so if it is dependent upon my school or my district to do it, then there's something that's being held back. Like, there's a barrier there. And how do we make it less about that and more about, like you're talking about, that ownership? What were some of the other challenges that the group was talking about? Crazy challenges? Did I hear crazy?
I'm trying to think of the phrase as challenges.
Oh, well, what were you thinking about? Sorry.
not overwhelm teachers. And if they're here trying to learn a particular cat, let's say they're talking about online learning communities, but they're still trying to figure out how to use TweetDeck or how to edit a shared Google document. Now they're not able, they may not be able to focus on the main topic, but they're still learning something, so they're sort of socializing and learning on their own.
And are we okay with this?
What is PD for? Is it supposed to help people learn something? Yeah.
So I think that's interesting, right? Like, because I do think that we, you know, I'm providing the front channel, but I've seen in this little eyepiece here lots of conversations that have both been on topic of what we're talking about here, as well as branching off. And thinking about, is it okay that those branches happen? Should we encourage those branches to happen? And sort of how often can we make them happen sort of within our own sessions? Other thoughts about challenges?
The one thing I thought about is the physics community is certainly an example of a lot of positive things happening in terms of sharing resources. I think one of the challenges, though, is you know, even in that community, there's difference of opinion around should we use Khan Academy. And I think that's sort of the entry point is we might have two people in a collaborative community disagreeing about Khan Academy. But the important challenge to me is how do we get them to return to that same space and share results when I've tried Khan Academy and you haven't? Because just disagreeing and saying, oh, these are my resources, those are your resources, and we never come back together again. I think the idea that how do we value and foster that in such a way that it's not a gotcha if I thought Khan Academy was going to work out and I come back and my results are not something that I, you know, am proud of or where I want to be.
And I think coming back to a space is actually something that we struggle with most in PD. It's like, we did this PD on this topic, and then we're on to the next topic, right? Like, and coming back to the same thing in a consistent way and saying, like, what did we learn, and how are we reflecting? Like, building in those times for reflection and the ability to keep on coming back, and even calling people back to the community can be really, really of value. Anything else before we want to move on? Yeah.
Another thing that we talked about was how sometimes people coming to PD might not know what they need. And so, although it'd be great to poll your audience and know exactly, give them what they want, but sometimes you have to look at your environment or your school, and you know they don't know this yet, they're going to need this, they're going to want it.
Yeah, the not knowing what you don't know side of things. And I think that that's important. One of the things that I stop short of a lot of times, though, is assuming that I know what they don't know, right? And by making sure, whether that's through polling or just saying who's in the room and those kinds of things, but by not making those assumptions, I feel like I'm in a much better state of saying, oh, okay, so you have done these things are things that you're still working on, these are things you've not even considered. But those kinds of things for me is very important, whether I'm facilitating like in a physical space or in a community. Like if I'm just posting resources to things that they saw 3 years ago from that last time that the pendulum swung, then I would say that maybe that's not going to be as valuable. But I love that idea that you're, you know, you're really able to have some expertise and to show that expertise too, right? Like we're not necessarily just passive, like whatever, guys, just learn. And like there is something that we can provide to teachers and to leaders, and say that, you know, there is something valuable here that we might be able to talk through, right? It's something like that. Yeah.
I don't know how to articulate it. It's been bouncing around in my head, but how especially our principals, what is their PD look? And if theirs is from whoever's giving them the PD, sit and get. And the principals should be, in one way or another, instructional leader in their building, the instructional leader. How does that filter down? And that's one thing that I've seen lacking a lot of places is if principals aren't involved in learning like this, how do you foster groups of teachers doing it? Unless you have a special principal who is willing to kind of maybe step outside. And I'm not trying to slam principals, but I do know that most of what I've seen with principals in a room is we'll talk, it'll stick to you, while you check your mail and check your phone and make sure everything's good at So what kind of impact might that have? Principals are encouraged to be part of like-minded communities where they're supporting each other in a more, I guess, more accessible way. How might that filter down to the buildings and then to the kids? Because I think teachers can learn despite that. I think kids can learn despite this to a point. It seems like principals will pull so many different directions that despite that, it's almost impossible.
Well, I don't want folks to be learning despite like things. I want them to be learning because of the things that we are doing. And while I don't have a solution, I actually think one of the things that DPS did this year was potentially valuable. And actually, Kirk Anderson and I were able to lead an affinity group of principals through, I mean, the broad topic was blended learning, but it was 12 principals that met 7 times this year, something like that. I think 8 times. And we went to 3 different schools and visited classrooms. We went to the Blended and Online Learning Symposium that was up in Greeley and did a number of things, but it was together. And you know, there's a bond with those folks that is a different bond than when we got together at the Principal Universal and there were, you know, I don't know, 200, no, there were probably more like 300 principals and APs, and the bond was not there, right? It was a lot of competition and those kinds of things, whereas I think we were in a space, I don't know if you want to speak to that experience, but it was different.
It was absolutely different. I think all the principals who were involved with it would say that it was different, and I think the seed of change.
Yeah. And so I think if you can think about like those kinds of structures where you're like giving them time away from the building, but also thinking about what are the groups and how are they, I mean, we were grouped on a particular topic. There were other affinity groups that were not blended learning focused, but like data culture and some of these other things. So some of those kinds of things, how are you organizing and how do you make it into a community even when it's not sort of typically? Okay, so one of the things that I know you will all have to do at some point is convince somebody else that an online community of practice is important. Okay? I don't know that I've given you everything to do that, but this is some of the research from that meta-analysis that talks about the effectiveness of the communities of practice as well as examples of how that worked. So I would like to arm you, if you would like to do that, to be able to essentially just go back to folks who you might need to convince. Some of my favorites are thinking about teachers are actually satisfied with this form of professional development, right? Like that there is something around, well, you know, we know that a lot of our PD doesn't actually work all that well, that they might be satisfied or that it might work better. And so I want to make sure that you have some things that you might be able to follow up with folks. But the last thing that I want to do, and I want to give at least enough time to play a little bit, is, and I think the Wi-Fi is like maybe 12% better than it was previously. What I want you all to do is to join the Blendtastic, Bombastic, Personalized PD community of practice, and it is this link up here. Actually, the man who started this amazing community of practice is in the room, Mr. Kevin Krogan. And so in this community, there's over 500 teachers, 400 teachers, that teachers and leaders from around, really around the world now, that are engaged in this conversation around how do we personalize PD. I'm noticing now that it's not actually opening, which is fine. I don't need it to open. It wasn't required for the session. But once you do have it up, if you would request to join the community, and we will be able to sort of approve you in the session here, as well as I would like you to try and either ask a question that is burning for you, something that you would like an answer to that was raised by this session, a resource that you found even at this early stage of our conference that you think everybody should have access to, or thinking about your own practice, something that you would like to share from your own practice. There are some examples here, and you know, it's some really, really good conversations that can start to happen. The last things that are on here are two things that we have done. One is like a online community of practice toolkit and the how-to document. So if you want to know how to create the online community, which, oh look, it's like almost loading. And so you can check out both of those documents. And I would say if you can join and start to ask questions, oh, there it is. So if you can join and ask questions or look back through and see what some of the questions were previously, this is one of my absolute favorite spaces to go and to think through with other educators that are super happy. And so I think I was projecting a little bit that we would have 500 members by the end of EdCo. And we do something special at every 100 members. I don't know, oh, there was 400 members, where we had the 400th member's daughter was here, and then this. So, and then this right here. This is important right there. So go in, request to join. We will add you, and then I'd like you to start thinking about, what's your next step? Where are you going to go with this? And I'm going to give you guys about 10 to 12 minutes to do that. And if you just want to let it load and talk about something else, that's also okay.
Join our join request for us?
Yes. Did you join request? So let me grab. Yay.
I struggle sometimes with the value unless I have a real, like what he was saying, unless I have a real purpose. And so I hear about our staff that say, well, whatever. Right. So, how finding that balance between people hang out sometimes all of that. So that's my big question. I'm on board. This is what I feel like we want to do. I particularly have like started with all we want to start time but what does that mean? There's a lot of questions that we have to, we probably, and we do, just need to dive in and start it out.
So if you refresh.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Yeah, I think you are now. We're going through. We're going through. What up? What's that? You're on it.
Every time I search somebody, I hit refresh.
Nice work.
I'm on it.
Yay. Oh, you're there. I mean, come on. So you have asked maybe a number of times. Look at this one.
This is my mini.
But I mean, the case is really nice.
Oh yeah, and I love it.
It's real special.
It is special because you can set it up like this, or you can turn it, and you can set it up like that.
I like that a lot.
And I do, and then I just stick it in a sleeve inside of my purse because it's the right size for a purse.
Yeah. I don't have a purse, but if I did, it would be the right size for that.
I know. Well, you can get one,
Right, that's true. I have a merce, a man purse. No.
It's just lighter.
Yes. Well, then there you go. I'm checking you off.
Ask that question.
Well, most of them are there's the illustration, there's quite a few teachers here. So, and I think part of what I have to do is take a step back to be willing to let it develop over a year. I want it to now, I want us to make, and I know that, but how do we, how do we best help facilitate that? I mean, how do we do that the best way possible? So we don't get too sidetracked. But, those are my challenges.
Deliberate.
Yes, right.
But it's all part of how we can use it. And I don't even forget, there we go, that's what we need to create. Lifelong learning coach.
Yeah. I think this is called a learning coach.
But we want to call it lifelong learning. Because the problem is that, and this we're just talking, is this idea that part of the reason, the problem is that I don't think the administrators necessarily feel like they have that ability. We want adults to be lifelong learners. We want students to be lifelong learners, ideally, so that way they know how to actually solve these problems. And so, like, the idea is but we haven't done the training with the teachers to not how to make kids lifelong learners. Like, how do we model that with the students? So let me ask you this: okay, so I had a teacher that worked for me. Deathly afraid of this.
Right, this thing.
Of the Google machine. Deathly afraid. Lack of understanding, whatever, right? So the focus in my conversations, and it took probably the conversations were not, how do I get you to be not deathly afraid of the Google machine? But how do I interact with you so that you truly understand its benefits to the learners that are in the classroom and in facilitate
Are you in?
Well, what I asked them then is,
Awesome.
mine's still
Love it.
it's
You're still
my
loading.
request.
Here, try and refresh.
That's what I felt. And, kind of initially, the first, before they did it, not to try to. Right, exactly. This is not, if I don't have the call in the right place, I'm going to be evaluated. Yeah, or I think so. That's
All right, everybody who's waiting for a request, press the refresh button.
right, but the teachers choose it.
But something that Joe does, even inside of our
I am in that.
Look at you. I love it. Because of things. Yeah. You should refresh.
I did.
But refresh. But keep on pressing the.
Just refresh.
So you're still waiting on the request? Okay. All right, Jason. Is that you? Brian. Brian, you're in now too.
I just pushed refresh, but it just loaded and I
Oh no!
It's when I push enter. I like skids.
All right, I want you to finalize the last few things that you're talking about. I want to sit in this one. It is. I'm just going to do this the whole time now. Hey. In the last 3 minutes, it's better. I wouldn't say great, but better. Okay. You're working on it. I trust you. Oh, for sure. We're going to be there. No. It is quantity. All right. So come on back. One of the biggest things that I try and do whenever we're in a session together is actually to recognize just how special it is that we are together. So in no time in your life will these people be assembled together again. Like, even if we tried to find a date to all get back together, there is no way that we could all do it. So this is a special space that you're in, and in every session that you're in throughout an EDCO, it will be that same thing. And so I want to make sure that we have taken enough advantage of the special nature of a session. And that, to me, is actually that we do form a community, and that we do challenge one another to do something, to have a next step that you would like to do, and that we would be codependent upon one another, that we would need one another in order to be able to implement that next step. And so I want you to think for a moment, silently, for just a moment, what is the next step that you would like to do, and what would you need from somebody else in this room in order to be able to do that thing? Whether it's a team member or it's somebody that you didn't know before you huddled up. But what is the next step that you would like to have with online communities, and what's something that you would need from somebody in order to do that? Okay? And this is just yours. Give you a moment to think. Okay, so what's a next step and something you need from one of the other people in the room? I don't need everybody to speak, but I do need a couple. Kevin, you look like you want to talk.
Well, I just wrote down my topic for a blog post. I'm gonna.
Okay, that's your next step?
Yeah, because I'm thinking, we were just talking, I was thinking about this idea of like how do we make the shift, and how do we actually put value on identifying like what are our values and our priorities as far as like that, like personalized spaces and whatever I need to post it. I'll need people to comment back because it's gonna be a hard one. Bust out.
And so it's something that you've been thinking about for a while. You're going to sit down, write it, and from us, you will need us to comment on it.
I will need commentary back.
Will you post it in the community so we can do that?
Oh, all of my posts go in.
I like that. Somebody else.
I've been thinking about how do we get people going back to the communities for a while, because I think we start a lot of communities and they're really exciting for a month, maybe 2 months, and then things kind of die down. And so, like, what are those opportunities? Almost enticing people to come back and show value, continuing value, and just asking questions, because I think sometimes people don't want to be the only person always posting in a community. They're like, oh, I'm going to stop being the only one talking in here, and then also committing to talking to those people who are asking questions, because if you ask several questions and you get nothing, you stop asking questions. So I think it's 2 commitments. One is when you join a community, like, that you're going to come back regularly for your own learning to post things and ask questions, but also to help other people think through what they're talking about.
Nice. Does anybody have a dead Edmodo group that you used to facilitate? Or Schoology, or any other platform, right? Okay. Or a hashtag that fell along the wayside. I like that idea of coming back, and I think of challenging yourself to come back. What do you got?
Well, that makes it a really interesting kind of question about whether an online community of practice can out-survive the platform of that community.
That's a really interesting idea, right? That the community is the thing. It's not the platform that the community resides within. Okay? And I do think that there are ways in which we can approach that, but actually having that that idea of future-proofing a community, right? Rather than it becomes obsolete with every new platform that becomes really cool. Are we all going to switch over to Google Classroom, or? Okay. So I want to thank you guys so much for coming and playing with me and learning a little bit, hopefully. Please do keep on adding to anything you'd like to in the doc or into the community itself. I'm really excited to learn with you all. Thanks a lot. And now that the Wi-Fi is fixed, you can go and check your email.